So is everyone in their assigned seat? If it ends up just being like this, I won't mind the everyday, but I just don't want a situation where we have, 40 or 50 people or 60, the full class in here. Yes, if you really prefer it, but if it's really crowded, I'll ask you to go though. So keep that in mind. So you're kind of at a risk, and you can always watch it in the hall on YouTube. Okay. Again, I'm trying to give you the best product I can, but I don't want people to get sick. If you really prefer it. But if it's really crowded, I'll ask you to go though. So keep that in mind. So you're kind of at a risk. And you can always watch in the hall on Let me. On YouTube. There. Can you guys still hear me without the mic on in the room? I just want the mic to be on the computer. Okay. Because that's kind of annoying, I think. Maybe you agree, maybe not. All right. So everyone got their seat? Is everyone okay with staying in their seats? Okay, good. I'm going to start recording. Make sure everyone on Blackboard can see what today's assignments are. Okay. All right. Well, my watch says 2:09, but it says 2:10 on my computer. So I don't know if I should start. I think I'll start. The computer, this is probably, oh, now they both say 2:10, so it doesn't matter. All right. So, beginning, welcome back to the live classroom. So there's a couple of you guys in here, and there's still lots of people who are joining virtually, and that's great as well. As usual, for those of you joining virtually, please feel free to send me an email if you can't hear me, or if you have obviously you can't hear me, but if you have a question, feel free to send me an email. All right, so today we're going to practice some supply and demand problems. I'm going to do actually 2 from the book, and we'll do them together, going through it step by step if you want some extra practice. Then I'm going to talk about markets and public policy, a federal policy and a local policy, one that was actually recently implemented in the state of Missouri. I have a little fun cartoon I'm going to end off with. But most importantly, tonight, the smart works for Chapter 2 and the Chapter 3 inquisitive are due, as well as Quiz 1. Hopefully, I saw a lot of people have gotten started. Most of you have at least done either the inquisitive or the smart works. About last time I checked, which was a couple hours ago, like 15 of you had already done the quiz, or at least started. Don't worry, you still got plenty of time. You have until midnight, but make sure you get those done. And you know what? The nice thing about getting it done is you don't have to worry about anything over the weekend. And so there's no lecture to listen to before next class because the quiz counts as your lecture, because normally I'd have you do that in class. So I don't think that's fair to give you guys extra work just because I'm putting all the assignments online that I normally did paper and pencil. All right, so no lecture before next class. All right, so you don't have to listen to any audio or video or read anything except the book, which you should already be reading, or at least hopefully taking a look at. Yes, question. So the question was, what's the time limit on the quiz? I can't remember exactly. It's either 25 or 30 minutes. It's one or the other. Which one is it? It's 30. Okay, 30 minutes. I think in the classroom I made it 25, but I gave students a few extra minutes because I know sometimes it's a little longer on the computer than it can be paper and pencil. I think that's plenty of time, by the way. So hopefully, for most people, it's plenty of time. All right, any other questions? And again, that includes you people listening. Yes? 10. And then the exam is going to have 30. So it's like 3 quizzes, which you have 80 minutes, so not quite 3 times as much time, but I give you as long as I would in class. I'd give 80 minutes. Technically, it's a 75-minute class, but I always give students 5 minutes extra. All right, other questions? Okay, I do want to say one more thing. All right, it's your personal life. I'm not going to do anything, but please, if you are traveling this week, and first off, I discourage you to travel. All right, but if you do travel, please be very careful around vulnerable people. In fact, ideally, Don't go around someone with a pre-existing condition. Don't go see grandma and grandpa who are in a nursing home. They won't even let you in probably, or who are in their own home. Please be responsible. And I know you hear this all the time, and I'm sorry to give it to you a lot, but we give it to you a lot because it's so important. All right? So please really think about being safe when you travel, okay, if you travel, and consider not traveling if you can. All right? I'm not going to make you do anything. Obviously, I can't, but please keep that in mind. All right. So we're going to do some problems in the book, and I'm going to have you work on it after I read it out loud. I want to make sure people who are watching the live stream are able to read it. All right. Let me zoom in a little bit. So we're going to do question 9, which has 2 parts. Oh, no. I hate it when it does that. Sorry. Sometimes when you press the button too many times, it goes this far. There we go. Okay, here we are. Let's take a look at 2 real-world episodes in the market for gasoline and try to figure out why the price fluctuates so much. So this is the problem on page 105 in your book. So if you're at home, you can look it up on your e-text, or you can actually pull out your book if you have the loose leaf version. All right? In the summer of 2008, and I don't know why it's so blurry. If I zoom out sometimes, maybe a little less blurry. In the summer of 2008, the price of regular gasoline in the United States soared to over $4 a gallon. Then, in the fall of that year, the U.S. economy fell into a deep recession that significantly reduced consumers' income. Use supply and demand to determine which curve shifted and what happened to the equilibrium price of gasoline. For this part of the question, assume no other changes in the market for gasoline. All right, so assume no other changes in the market for gasoline. So if you remember at the end of last class, I gave you some hints on how to solve these problems. I encourage you to do that. All right, I'm going to give you a couple minutes. By the way, what does that last assumption essentially state? Anyone remember the word for that? Assume no other changes in the market for gasoline? It's Latin. I'll give you a hint. You remember? Anyone remember? Ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus. All right, so I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes to work on that, then we'll do it together. I encourage you to do it step by step like I did at the end of last class for, I don't remember what problem we went over, but I did it, for the Hudsucker proxy problem. You have a question? There's a part B. We'll do it. I'll have you do it after you do this part. The reason I have you do this is we are using supply and demand for the rest of the class. So it's really good to understand the model in the simplest cases, which is what we're doing here, okay? All right, I will give you another minute, and then I'm going to start going over it. And if you don't have it, that's okay. I will do another practice one. All right. So the first step is search. So that's where we draw the graph and label it. So what market are we looking at? The market for gas, good. So make sure you label it. All right, so we're looking at the market for gas. Remember, supply is upward sloping and demand is downward sloping. And we'll label our initial price and quantity as Q1 and P1. If you took macro and you say, my teacher said Q0 and P0, that's fine, I don't care. Or Q0 and P0, I don't care. All right, I have a question, I think, from, oh, nope, never mind. All right. Search was the first step. Excuse me, that was start. Start. Now search, I apologize. So what changed? All right, I'm going to ask the class in here. What changed? Which of those 10 determinants changed? Consumer income, good. I actually need a little more, which I'll get to in a minute, but let me start by writing that. Consumer income. First off, did it go up or down? It went down. Now this is important. For what type of good? For a normal good. Okay, so the consumer income went down for a normal good. Shift. Which curve does that affect? Supply or demand, and which way is it going to go? Yes. Good. So D is going to shift left. All right, so now let's draw that. My beautiful art skills. So this is D1, and now we have another demand, so this will be D2. If you want, you can label the years as well. That's fine. All right. 3. Slide. So let's say the price stayed at P1, right? So at this price of P1, the quantity supplied is the same, right? Everyone see that? Well, the quantity demanded is no longer this point. Now it's way over here. So what do we have? What do we have? This is the quantity demanded and this is quantity supplied. So quantity demanded is, excuse me, this is quantity demanded, this is quantity supplied. I said it backwards, I apologize. Quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied. Anyone remember the name of that? Surplus, good. So what's going to happen to price? Yeah, price is going to start going down, all right? Zoom out a little so I can get more in here for those of you watching. So P tends down, so the price is going to go down. This is going to be our new point, P2 and Q2. All right, everyone with me? And so finally, the fourth step, which is the most important, because really this is what we were interested in, is that the price of the good fell and the quantity fell, And most of you were not driving at this time. I don't think anyone in here would have been old enough to drive, but it was a big difference. In 2007, gas was expensive. In 2006, $4 a gallon. Then, in a few months, it just plummeted. In fact, I think it almost was like at $1 at one point. Maybe even I found it a little less than $1 at that point in the heat of the Great Recession. It happened again during the pandemic. It wasn't as high to begin with. I don't think it was ever at 3 or 4, but it was in the mid 2s maybe, I think. Yes. It was a mix of both supply and demand. So it stayed low because of that. That's why it never went back up to 3 or 4. And the US started producing more, which we're going to get to actually kind of in the next problem. But the reason it went even lower to like $1 at one point was because of the demand destruction again, right? People's incomes were falling from the pandemic. And it wasn't just consumer income. Everything was closed, right? I mean, you didn't want to go out, right? I don't know if you want to call that a change in tastes or preferences, right? People just didn't want to go out because they didn't want to get sick and because everything was closed. So you're right, but during the pandemic, the reason it went down even more was because of the pandemic. But you're right, the reason it never went back up to that 3 or 4 was because Russia, the United States, Saudi Arabia, all were producing more oil than they were in 2005. Certainly the United States. Okay, so let's do one more. Let's get a little more practice. So this is part B. I'll zoom in for people watching, but again, right? By the summer, and I don't know if they'll be able to read it or not. So just look at page 106, part B, if you're watching the live stream in your book. By the summer of 2014, the price of regular gasoline in the United States was hovering around $3.50 per gallon, so it did start going up again. But innovation in oil extraction technology, such as hydraulic fracking, reduced the price of crude oil significantly. Crude oil is the primary input for gasoline production. Use the supply and demand model to determine which curve shifted and then what happened to the equilibrium price of gasoline. For this part of the question, assume no other changes in the market for gasoline. Again, that ceteris paribus assumption, okay? And for those of you watching, I'll put a little sign up because now we're doing 9B instead of 9A. So I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes again. And hopefully it'll be easier this time that we went through the other example. All right, just a couple more seconds, and we're going to go over it together. All right, so I actually already started this one. So we're still looking at the market for gas, right? We're not talking about a different market. You have to be careful on this one because they talk about two goods. What other good did they talk about in the question? Anyone remember? Crude oil. So you have to be careful. Do not draw the market for crude oil. I saw some confusion. Did you do that? That's okay. That's why we're going over this together. Search. Be careful here. What changed? Input price. And what did it do? Good. It's not technology. I've had students say technology. If we were talking about the market for crude oil and we were graphing the market for crude oil, it would be technology. Which curve changes? Supply or demand? Supply. And which way does it shift? To the right. Good. All right, so at P1, so let's say the price stayed at P1. Well, demand didn't change. That's still here, right? The quantity demanded is still the same. But notice at that price, this is the quantity supplied. So which one's bigger? Quantity supplied or quantity demanded at that price? Quantity supplied. So now quantity supplied is bigger than quantity demanded. So we have a surplus. Right? We have more than we need. So what's going to happen to prices? They're going to go down. Now, I know many of you at some point are just going to find that new point and label it, and that's okay. The reason I go through it step by step is because I want you to understand why prices go down. It's not magic. And that's what I was trying to emphasize last class when I talk about markets and the invisible hand. When we say invisible hand, you might think, ooh, it's magic. No. It happens because buyers are selfish and sellers are selfish. It has nothing to do with people wanting to get there, okay? Sellers are not able to sell all their gasoline, all right? And so they're going to lower the price. And buyers, of course, are happy to save money. Settle, well, here, P went down and Q went up. Are there any questions about this? All right, I know we're going through it kind of slowly, but I really want people to understand the supply and demand model. Right now, to some more fun stuff. We are going to talk a little bit about public policy and supply and demand. So let's consider the market for staple crops. These are things like beans and wheat and corn. Corn is probably the most important one. I'll talk about why in a minute. Not because corn is like the healthiest or anything like that. I'll explain. Now, I'm not going to draw it, but I want to ask you, what happened in the United States in the early part of the last century? What happened to farming technology in the late 1800s and early 1900s? Did it get better or worse? It got a lot better. All right, we don't have people doing nearly as many things by hand as they used to. We got tractors, we got fertilizers, we got better seeds, etc. And so what happened, we're not going to draw this, what happened is the price of food did what because of that? what did the price of food start doing? Did it go up or down from that better technology? It went down. All right. Now, it could have gone down even further. So let's suppose this is the current price. I'll call this PC, the current price. If left alone, what's going to happen? If there's no public policy, what is going to happen to the price of staple crops? If that's the price now, or if that was the price in 1940 or something. What would happen if this were the price? Remember last time we talked about what happens if the price is above the equilibrium price? It's going to go down. You want to put the farmers out of business? We can't let the price go down any further. It's already gone down a lot. But we don't want a surplus, right? We're already filling up silo after silo with corn and grain, right? There's only so much storage we have. And this is what happened to oil, actually. All the ships were so full during the pandemic. That's why oil prices actually went negative, right? They didn't have anyone intervene. But here the government has intervened several times, and that's what we're going to talk about. If they want to intervene, there's two things they can do besides letting the price fall. Obviously, they could let the price fall, but they want to keep the farmers in business. So there's two things that they could do. What are the two things they could do? To keep the price high for farmers. Oh, that would make it worse. It's going to be harder for a farmer to survive if he has to pay taxes on. Well, that could keep the price high, but that's probably not going to benefit farmers very much. Might benefit the government. So someone in the class said tax it. That's a good guess. There's two ways to do it. I'll tell you the first one. This is the one they did at first. You can shift the demand curve to the right. Everyone see that? If I shift the demand curve to the right, if I shift the demand curve to the right, does everyone see? If we shift it far enough, we could even keep this price as an equilibrium price. Heck, if we shift it far enough, we could even raise it. Did the government do that? Did the federal government shift the demand for food to the right? Yes. How did it do that? Have you ever heard of the school lunch programs? Don't kids eat corn at lunch? Don't kids eat sandwiches at lunch? These are children who often might not get much food otherwise. And I'm not saying that's a bad program, but it didn't just help those kids, right? It also helped the farmers who produced that food. All right, so that shifted it to the right. Technology keeps getting better and better. Prices are still, there's downward pressure. We better come up with another program. Foreign aid. We can dump all our extra food into foreign countries. Now, it might affect the price in the foreign country, but that's not going to affect the price in our country necessarily. Or it might, but the point being, it's a way to get rid of some of that food, to get rid of some of that surplus. That still wasn't enough. There was still downward pressure on prices. Does anyone know what the ethanol mandate was? I think it either passed in 2005 or 2007. Yes. Right. So a student actually answered correctly. You had to have, I don't know, they might have repealed it recently. I'm not sure, but you had to have 10% of gasoline sold be ethanol, at least in the lower grades. All right. So 10% of what you're putting in your tank wasn't pure gasoline, it was actually corn fuel, whatever you want to call it, ethanol. Now, why would they do that? Well, what's that going to do to the demand for corn? It's going to shift to the right. And when you increase the demand for corn, more farmers are going to grow corn. So that's going to help the wheat farmers because some of those corn farmers are going to switch to wheat, or excuse me, some of those wheat farmers are going to switch to corn. So then the price of wheat's going to go up too, et cetera. So it's going to have a domino effect. Well, in fact, at that time, they might have overdone it. There were riots in some countries because the price of corn was so high, right? And at that time. That still, though, was not the only thing they did. What else could you do besides shift demand to the right? You could shift supply to the left. Good. Did they do that? Do you think the government did this? The answer is yes. So how did they do that? It's simple. You pay people not to grow crops. This was done. I'm not kidding. So you say, okay, if you don't grow crops, we'll pay you a certain amount. Or if you leave 10% of your land without crops, we'll pay you. We're going to talk about farmers throughout this course. Farmers are really smart. I know a farmer, and she tells me her way of thinking. Farmers are really smart. They're almost like economists without economics training. So what did they do? Well, here's what farmers did. They say, we'll pay you, and let's just say that we'll pay you not to use 10% of your land. Well, farmers have this really rocky soil in this corner that's 10% of their land, and they have this other fertile soil that's beautiful. If you're a farmer, are you going to stop planting in your rocky soil, or are you going to stop planting in your fertile soil? The rocky soil. So the government paid people not to farm, and they're thinking, oh, we'll have 10% fewer crops, right? They're using 10% less land. No. It's an unintended consequence, right? Something from the beginning of class. It might have cut it like 1%, right? Because farmers are just not using the crappiest land that they have. All right, so it's kind of cool. Even with just our simple supply and demand model, we can already start talking about ways to have influence public policy. Are there any questions about this? And we're going to talk more about this when we talk about elasticity as well. All right, I have another one. This one is local, so it's a bit more close to home. I used to actually use the example of Arizona, but Missouri recently did it. Right now, we have a massive shortage in substitute teachers. Right, a lot of schools in Missouri are in person, or at least partially in person. And so there's a massive shortage of substitute teachers. And schools compete for them. Nixa competes with Ozark. Springfield competes with Stafford, etc. So this is a labor market. I'll put a W, and I'll put a Q. So the current wage, I think, is something, at least in this area, close to $100. Some pay a little less than that, but it's close to $100 a day, not an hour. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, I got to become a sub, $100 an hour, no, $100 a day, all right? And you say, well, how do you know there's a shortage? Because I know there's a shortage, okay? If I know there's a shortage, the price has to be below the equilibrium price. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a shortage. Now, schools have budgets. All right? They can't just always say, hey, you know what, we'll double sub pay. If they do that, they have to figure out something else to cut. They can't just borrow money like a company could. And even companies can't always do that, but it's harder for a school to, without voter approval, etc. So if you want to have more subs in Missouri, what can you do? Shift your supply of subs to the right. How do you do that? Good. So you lower the standards to become a substitute teacher. And they've done that. I believe it's temporary. I'm not sure. I hope it's temporary. And I understand. I'm not saying it's a bad idea to do right now. These are kind of unusual times, right? Things are different here. I mean, look at this classroom. So I'm not, criticizing the state for what it's doing, but that's exactly what it did. It lowered the standards to shift the supply curve to the right. So one thing you could do is you could shift the supply curve to the right by lowering the standards. Good. You could raise the pay. What's the third way you could get rid of substitutes? Or get rid of the shortage, excuse me. So decrease demand. So one thing is you could hire more teachers, but that's expensive, so that doesn't really solve the problem. But you could have larger classrooms, right? So that, you know, it's not as you won't need as many subs, right? Because if you have fewer teachers, it's less likely a teacher is going to be sick, right? The more teachers you have, the more likely one's going to be sick. You could have vice principals teach classes, or the principal teach a class, right? So you could decrease the demand is what I'm getting at, right? There's lots of ways you might be able to do it. So there's two ways. So same thing as before. So before we were eliminating a surplus, so now we're eliminating a shortage. Besides increasing the price. Remember, in labor markets, the wage is the price of labor. So I know this is a W, but that's just a price. And those are shifting Now I want to talk about a couple other things. I'm not going to draw them because I think you're starting to get the point. Think about parking at the university. Have you ever come, not this year's a little different, but last year, did you ever come and you were not able to find a spot? So what did that mean? There was a what? There was a shortage. How could you eliminate the shortage of parking at the university? So you could increase supply, and that's making another parking lot. What else could you do? Beg your pardon? Make them pay. So a lot of universities make you pay per visit, not just, because right now, what's the cost of parking once you buy your, per year? I know that sounds steep. At Arizona, when I was there, it was $600, and I think that was per semester. All right. Now, to your defense, I also was at a university where they didn't charge for parking. But I'm just saying it's not unreasonable. So you could raise the price of the tag, and you might lose some people, but you're probably not going to lose many unless you raise it a lot. But if you charge people to park every time they park, now the marginal cost of parking isn't zero. Now you're going to think about, boy, do I want to leave my car there all day? Right? Maybe I'm going to walk from my apartment. Maybe I'm going to take the Bear Claw, right? Or what's it called? Bear Claw? Bear Line, that's right. Bear Claw's a donut or something like that. Sorry about that. The Bear Line. Which leads me to the next one. So you could increase supply. You could raise the price, either by raising the price of the pass or the price per day. Or you could decrease demand by doing what? Well, you could make them feel bad, I guess. You drove, you're wasting gas, that's bad for the environment. And we do that, I guess. You're right, that's if you put that on the quiz, perfect answer. You're basically changing their preferences. That's what you're trying to do. You're shifting demand by changing their preferences. Sort of a Go Green campaign or something like that. What about more Bear Line routes? Right, something like that. So there's lots of ways we could eliminate the shortage. So if you're ever in a position, you can think about, well, how can I eliminate the shortage? And if you listen to my lecture on supply with nursing, they hired economists to figure out, how do we get rid of this nursing shortage? Well, the first thing the economist said is raise the wage, right? That's the easiest way. Well, some hospitals said, we can't afford it. So what are the other ways you could do it? Well, you could increase supply or decrease demand. Here you probably don't want to decrease demand. What does decreasing demand mean with the nursing shortage? We'll just pull the plug on a few people, right? I'm not trying to be morbid, but I'm just getting to the point. You probably don't want to solve it that way. I'm not saying you couldn't. And maybe you could hire more nursing assistants or more doctors, but doctors are even more expensive, right? Maybe more nursing assistants, which is a much bigger thing now than it was in the past. But the easiest thing to do is increase supply. And at the time, so when I told this story, this study was in the 90s, early 2000s, I don't remember. But what demographic were they completely ignoring for the longest time? Men. And hopefully none of you think that nursing is no longer a quote-unquote girl or female job, a very sexist notion. Nursing is for anyone. It's a great career path. I think it's a really cool career path. Another thing they did to increase supply was make the schedules more appealing. It used to be, I got 4 hours on Saturday, I got 8 hours on Monday, then got another 4 hours on Thursday at 2 a.m. Now you get 3 12s, and that's it. And if you want a fourth one, you can, and it's overtime for 8 of those hours. So it's actually a lot more appealing. So they increase supply by targeting more people and by making the schedule more appealing. All right, so what's cool about this lecture is it really gives you a way, if you're in a high-level position, of how do you solve problems. Oftentimes, the only thing people think of, well, we can raise the price, or we can raise the wage, or we can lower the price, or lower the wage. I'm not saying that's not the solution, but maybe there's other solutions you can come up with. All right, I want to do one more thing before I go. And I just think this is really fun. Most of you probably don't read comics. When I was a kid, we would fight for the comics every day at breakfast. All right, times have changed. I want to make sure people can see this. Anyone heard of Calvin and Hobbes? All right, thanks for not making me feel too old. All right. $15 a glass. That's right. Want some? How do you justify charging $15? Where's the demand? Supply and demand is his answer. Where's the demand? I don't see any demand. There's lots of demand. Yeah, sure. As the sole stockholder in this enterprise, I demand monstrous profits on my investment. As president and CEO of the company, I demand an exorbitant salary. And as my own employee, I demand a high hourly wage and all sorts of company benefits, and then there's overhead and actual production cost. But it looks like you just threw a lemon in some sludge water. Well, I have to cut costs somewhere if I want to stay competitive. Sorry, this little thing's getting in the way. Here we are. What if I get sick from that? Caveat emptor is the motto we stand behind. I'd have to charge more if we followed health and environmental regulations. You're out of your mind. I'm going home to get something to drink. Sure, put me out of a job. It's you anti-business types who ruin the economy. And you see him pissed off. He looks pretty angry. Hopefully you guys would all agree with that. And he's going somewhere. Anyone have a guess where he's going? What do businesses do when they're in trouble? They go for their subsidization from the government, which in this case is mama. I need to be subsidized. All right, so because it's Labor Day weekend, I'll end 5 minutes early. And hopefully we ended off that kind of fun note. I like those fun kind of cartoons. Hopefully you guys enjoy them as well. Again, stay safe. Does anyone have any questions before we go? Yes, go ahead. Tonight at midnight. All right, yeah. So again, for those of you who maybe joined the live stream late, do not forget, we have Chapter 2 SmartWorks and Chapter 3 Inquisitive due tonight. All right, end of the day. And quiz 1. So if you haven't started on any of these assignments, I really suggest starting it now. Most of you have, and that's good. But if you haven't, you've got a little more than 9 hours. All right. So before you start packing up your car, if you're traveling, which I advise against, please complete your assignments. All right, have a safe and lovely Memorial Day week. Wait, Labor Day, right? I always get confused. Labor Day weekend.